My name is Peyton Ellis, and at 38, I stood in the rain-soaked courtyard of St. Mary's Chapel, a quaint, ivy-draped sanctuary tucked away in London's Notting Hill. The drizzle clung to my black wool coat, each drop a cold reminder of the grief weighing on my heart. Today was my mother Isabel's funeral, and I braced myself for the moment my sister, Sophie Laurent, would sweep in, likely with her influencer-curated poise and that smug, diamond-laden smile. 6 years had passed since she stole Hugo Albrecht, my venture capitalist fiancé, the man I'd envisioned building a life with in a sunlit villa somewhere along the Amalfi Coast. I hadn't seen either of them since that gut-wrenching betrayal, the kind that fractures families and leaves scars that ache in the quiet moments. Yet, standing there, clutching a single white rose from my mother's garden, I felt an unexpected calm, like the hush before a storm breaks. Sophie, with her perfectly staged Instagram life, had no idea who I'd married or how fate, with its cruel and poetic symmetry, had turned the tables. The chapel's ancient stone walls loomed around me, their weathered surfaces whispering of centuries past, much like the memories of my mother, Isabelle Dubois, a retired literature professor whose love for Keats and Woolf had shaped my own passion for art. She'd been the heart of our family, her Oxford home a haven of books and warmth where Sophie and I grew up, two sisters bound by love but divided by rivalry. Isabel's pancreatic cancer diagnosis 8 months ago had unraveled me. I'd flown from Paris, where I now lived, to spend her final weeks by her side, holding her frail hand as she urged me to find peace. "Life is too short for grudges, Peyton," she'd whispered, her voice weak but resolute. Her death left a void, but also a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. To mend the rift with Sophie. 6 years earlier, at 32, my life in London had glittered with promise. As an art curator in Mayfair, I orchestrated exhibitions that drew Europe's elite, my days filled with Renaissance paintings and champagne-soaked gallery openings. But my heart craved more than professional acclaim. Hugo Albrecht entered my world at a charity auction in Kensington, his German accent and easy charm cutting through the room's hum like a blade. A venture capitalist at 36, Hugo was a titan in tech investments. His name splashed across Financial Times for his daring deals. Our connection was electric. Dinners at Le Gavroche, weekends in Florence's art-drenched streets, stolen kisses under Parisian streetlights. When he proposed on a moonlit boat gliding across Lake Geneva, his 5-carat emerald ring catching the stars, I said yes without hesitation. My parents, Isabelle and Marcel, a retired diplomat, were thrilled, already dreaming of a wedding in a Cotswolds manor. Sophie, my younger sister by 2 years, was a fashion influencer whose Instagram empire boasted millions of followers. Growing up, she'd always coveted what was mine, my dresses, my achievements, my spotlight. Yet I named her my maid of honor, hoping maturity had dulled her competitive edge. At our engagement party, held in the rose-filled garden of our parents' Oxford estate, Sophie's laughter rang too loud, her hand lingering on Hugo's arm. Isabelle noticed, warning me softly, "She's drawn to what shines, Peyton. Be careful." I dismissed it, blind to the storm brewing. Little did I know, Sophie's betrayal would shatter my world, and today, at our mother's funeral, she'd face the husband I'd chosen, a man whose quiet strength made Hugo's flash seem hollow. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. 6 years ago, my life in London sparkled like a Turner painting, vibrant yet delicate, poised on the edge of something grander. 32, I was a rising star in the art world, curating exhibitions at the prestigious Hawthorne Gallery in Mayfair. My days were a whirlwind of rare Botticelli sketches, gilded frames, and high-profile collectors who sipped vintage Krug at my openings. I'd spend mornings deciphering the brushstrokes of Renaissance masters and evenings charming patrons at black-tie galas, my navy silk gowns whispering against polished marble floors. Yet, beneath the glamour, my heart ached for something deeper, a connection beyond the canvas, a love to anchor my restless soul. That longing found its answer when I met Hugo Albrecht at a charity auction in Kensington, orchestrated by my dear friend Clara Voss, a gallery owner with an artist's eye and a matchmaker's heart. Hugo, 40, was a vision of effortless charisma, tall, with piercing blue eyes that held secrets and a German accent that turned every syllable into a velvet promise. A venture capitalist whose tech startups fueled headlines in the Financial Times, he moved through the room like a conductor, silencing chatter with a single disarming smile. Clara introduced us beneath a chandelier dripping with crystal, her knowing grin suggesting she'd planned this collision. Our first conversation, over flutes of champagne, danced from Klimt's symbolism to Berlin's startup scene. By the time he asked me to dinner, I was captivated. Our first date, at a candlelit rooftop restaurant overlooking the Thames, felt like a scene from a Fellini film. The London skyline glittered, and Hugo's stories of scaling his empire made my heart race. That night, I called my mother, Isabelle Dubois, a retired literature professor whose love for romantic poets shaped my dreams. "Maman," I whispered, curled on my Chelsea Flats velvet sofa, "I think he's the one." Our romance was a tapestry of stolen moments and grand gestures. Hugo whisked me to the Amalfi Coast, where we sipped limoncello on cliffs overlooking turquoise waters. In Florence, he secured private tours of the Uffizi Gallery, his hand warm in mine as we lingered before Botticelli's Primavera. Parisian cafés became our sanctuaries, where we'd share croissants and secrets under Haussmannian awnings. 18 months later, on a midnight boat ride across Lake Geneva, the Alps silhouetted against a star-strewn sky, Hugo knelt on the deck. The 5-carat emerald ring he offered caught the starlight, its facets mirroring my soaring heart. "Peyton, will you build a life with me?" he asked, his voice low and certain. My yes echoed across the water. My parents, Isabelle and Marcel, a retired diplomat whose career had spanned Vienna and Brussels, were ecstatic. Isabelle, with her poet's soul, began sketching plans for a wedding at a historic Cotswolds manor, its rose gardens perfect for a summer ceremony. Marcel, ever practical, calculated guest lists, envisioning ambassadors and artists toasting our union. But then there was Sophie Laurent, my younger sister by 2 years, a shadow cast across my joy. Growing up in our book-lined Oxford home, where shelves groaned with Proust and Austen, we'd been close yet fiercely competitive. Sophie, now a fashion influencer with 3 million Instagram followers, thrived in the spotlight. Her curated posts, couture gowns, Milan runway shows masked a hunger for what was mine. If I wore a new dress, she'd unveil a bespoke Versace. If I won an art award, she'd flaunt a Gucci campaign. Isabelle, ever the peacemaker, balanced our rivalry with handwritten notes tucked into our lunchboxes, each uniquely crafted to soothe our egos. But Sophie's envy simmered, a quiet current beneath her dazzling smile. Till I chose her as my maid of honor, hoping our adult selves could bridge childhood wounds. Isabelle encouraged it, her eyes soft with hope. "It'll bring you closer, darling," she said, polishing a silver teapot in our Oxford kitchen. The cracks in my fairy tale appeared at our engagement party, held at my parents' ivy-clad Oxford estate. The garden glowed with fairy lights, roses perfuming the air as guests sipped Veuve Clicquot. Sophie, in a shimmering Dior gown, flirted shamelessly with Hugo, her laughter too loud, her manicured hand lingering on his arm as he recounted a deal in Munich. I brushed it off. She was dating Julian, a luxury car dealer who gifted her Hermes bags after all. But her eyes followed Hugo, bright with something I refused to name. Later, as we cleared crystal flutes, Isabelle pulled me aside, her hands arranging roses in a porcelain vase. "Peyton, darling," she said, her voice low. Sophie's eyes follow Hugo like a moth to flame. "Be cautious." I laughed, dismissing her concern as maternal overreach. "She's just being her dramatic self, maman," I said, kissing her cheek. "She's with Julian. It's fine." But as I rejoined the party, catching Sophie's gaze linger on Hugo across the lawn, a chill settled in my chest, a premonition of the betrayal that would soon shatter my world. 3 months before our wedding, the fairy tale I'd woven with Hugo Albrecht began to unravel, thread by fragile thread. His late nights at his gleaming Canary Wharf office, a glass tower piercing London's skyline, became routine, his phone buzzing with client messages at 2 a.m. as we lay in our Chelsea flat. Once, those notifications would have been background noise to our whispered plans for a future in a Tuscan villa. Now they felt like intrusions, each ping a splinter in my trust. Our romantic dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants like Le Gavre Roche grew tense, the clink of crystal wine glasses unable to mask the strain. Hugo, once enchanted by my bohemian style, my flowing scarves and artist's smudges, now critiqued it with a sneer. "Peyton, that dress looks like you pulled it from a Montmartre flea market," he'd say, his German accent sharp. He'd snap when I left paintbrushes on the counter, their bristles still wet from sketching studies for my next exhibition at the Hawthorne Gallery. I'd apologize, swallowing the hurt, desperate to reclaim the man who'd once kissed my paint-stained fingers. Meanwhile, my sister Sophie Laurent inserted herself into our wedding plans with a zeal that felt both helpful and invasive. As a fashion influencer, she thrived on control, her Instagram feed a curated shrine to her own radiance. When my curatorial duties kept me late, negotiating with Parisian collectors or cataloging Renaissance etchings, Sophie volunteered for vendor meetings. "I'll handle the florist, Peyton," she'd say, her voice honeyed. "You're too busy being brilliant." I trusted her, clinging to the hope that our childhood rivalry, her stealing my velvet ribbons or mimicking my art school sketches, had faded. But unease crept in one evening at a Soho patisserie, its pastel macarons gleaming under glass. Hugo had bailed on our cake-tasting appointment, citing a last-minute deal in Zurich. Sophie went instead, giggling as she declared Hugo's love for pistachio macarons. How does she know that? I wondered, my stomach twisting as her laughter echoed in the chandelier-lit room. I pushed the thought away, chalking it up to her flair for drama, but the seed of doubt took root. The truth crashed over me like a North Sea storm. One crisp autumn morning, cleaning Hugo's Bentley before a gallery event, I found a pearl earring wedged in the passenger seat, a delicate heirloom piece my grandmother had given Sophie for her 21st birthday. Single pearl gleamed like a betrayal. When I confronted Hugo that evening in our flat, his composure was infuriatingly smooth. "She must have dropped it when I drove her to a photo shoot in Shoreditch," he said, sipping a glass of Barolo. "Her Porsche was at the mechanic." Sophie's story, delivered over the phone with rehearsed nonchalance, matched perfectly. "Oh, thank God you found it!" "My car was in for repairs." Their synchronized calm raised red flags, a choreography too precise. Tress gnawed at me, my weight plummeted, dark circles framed my eyes like smudged charcoal. In secret, I started therapy in a discreet Bloomsbury office, confessing my fears to a kind-eyed counselor. I was desperate to salvage the life I'd envisioned, a Cotswolds wedding, a shared future with Hugo, my rock point. 3 weeks before the wedding, Hugo's demeanor turned colder than a Baltic winter. Over dinner at our favorite Knightsbridge brasserie, he suggested postponing. "You're not yourself, Peyton," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "Maybe we're moving too fast." His words cut deeper than any critique of my wardrobe. I begged for answers, my voice trembling as I clutched my napkin. "What's wrong, Hugo? What have I done?" He brushed me off, his blue eyes distant, checking his phone as if I were a client he could dismiss. That night, I woke at 3 a.m. to an empty bed. From the guest room, I heard his hushed voice. "Not now, she'll hear." "Soon, I promise." The words slithered into my heart, confirming my worst fears. I lay awake, the moonlight casting shadows like cracks across our future. The next day, determined to confront him, I decided to surprise Hugo at his sleek Frankfurt office, where he was sealing a deal with a Munich tech firm. I packed a picnic basket with his favorite truffle sandwiches from a Marylebone deli, a gesture to rekindle our spark. At his building, a glass monolith reflecting the main river, the receptionist stammered nervously, her eyes darting to Hugo's closed door. "Frau Ellis, he's in a meeting," she said, but her hesitation fueled my suspicion. I brushed past her, my heels clicking on the marble floor, and pushed open his office door. The world stopped. Hugo and Sophie were locked in a kiss, her silk Hermes scarf askew, his hands gripping her waist with a familiarity that spoke of countless stolen moments. The room spun, my breath caught in my throat. They didn't notice me until the door clicked shut, a sound like the snap of my breaking heart. "It's not what it looks like," Hugo stammered, straightening his tie, but Sophie's defiant glare told the truth. "It just happened," she said, her voice sharp with entitlement. "Since the engagement party. For months, they'd betrayed me, secret calls while I curated exhibitions, stolen moments while I chose peonies for our wedding." I dropped the basket, truffle sandwiches spilling across the floor. "You deserve each other," I said, my voice steady despite the pain ripping through me. Tears came only in the elevator, hot and unstoppable. By the time I reached my Notting Hill flat, I was a wreck, collapsing onto the hardwood floor. Isabel and Marcel rushed over, using their spare key when I couldn't open the door. Isabel held me as I sobbed, her lavender scent grounding me. Marcel, his diplomat's restraint shattered, muttered about confronting Hugo, his face red with fury. "I'll ruin him," he growled, but Isabel calmed him, her own eyes blazing with a mother's wrath. Canceling the wedding was agony, each call to vendors a fresh wound. I returned Hugo's emerald ring via his doorman, learning Sophie had already moved into his Canary Wharf penthouse, her designer dresses filling closets that once held my sketches. Friends whispered of her calculated pursuit, late-night texts, suggestive photos sent while I was at gallery openings in Madrid or Vienna. The scandal tore through London's elite. Some sided with Hugo's wealth, dazzled by his power, while others pitted me, their sympathy a bitter pill. Isabel became my anchor, cooking cocoa vin and listening to my rage in her Oxford kitchen. But Sophie's venom surfaced at a family dinner, her words slicing deep. "You always got everything first, Peyton, Oxford, the gallery, the spotlight." For once, I won. I walked out, vowing to cut her from my life, her betrayal a wound too raw to heal. Devastated, I fled London's ghosts, their shadows lurking in every Mayfair gallery and Thameside cafe. A curator position at the Musée d'Art Moderne in Paris beckoned, and I seized it, trading England's drizzle for the City of Light. My new flat near Montmartre, a charming attic with slanted ceilings and a view of Sacré-Cœur, felt like a sanctuary yet echoed with loneliness. I threw myself into work, curating avant-garde exhibitions, bold installations of neon and steel that drew Paris's art elite. Critics praised my vision, Le Figaro calling my debut show a revelation, but behind the accolades, depression coiled like ivy. Nights found me staring at canvases, my thoughts spiraling to Hugo and Sophie's betrayal. My mother, Isabel, became my lifeline, her weekly calls from Oxford a tether to sanity. Her voice, warm as the Provençal sun, soothed me, but her updates about Sophie and Hugo's lavish life stung like salt in a wound. "They're at yacht parties in Cannes," she'd say cautiously, or Milan fashion shows. Each word painted Sophie's Instagram-perfect world, her posts dripping with champagne and couture. 6 months after my move, Isabel called with news that pierced deeper. Sophie and Hugo had married in a chic Monaco ceremony, the kind featured in Vogue. Sophie's social media flaunted my old emerald ring, its gleam mocking me from her manicured finger. That night, I hit rock bottom, drowning my pain in a bottle of Bordeaux, its ruby depths blurring old photos of Hugo and me on my phone. I wept until dawn, curled on my flat's hardwood floor, the Parisian skyline indifferent beyond my window. But as morning light filtered through lace curtains, clarity emerged like a phoenix. I deleted their photos, blocked them on every platform, and vowed to reclaim my life, no longer theirs to define. Paris, with its cobblestone charm, began to heal me. At an eco-architecture conference in the Marais, I met Luca Moretti, a 39-year-old Italian whose quiet strength contrasted Hugo's ostentatious flash. Luca's soft Piedmontese accent wove through his passionate talk on sustainable design, green rooftops, solar-powered communities. Unlike Hugo's tailored suits and Rolex gleam, Luca wore linen shirts, his dark eyes warm with sincerity. We bonded over shared loves. Caravaggio's chiaroscuro, urban renewal, the scent of espresso in tiny cafes. Our connection began as professional, swapping ideas over croissants at Café de Flore. My friend Clara Voss, visiting from London, teased me over wine at Le Marais Le Progrès. Luca's glances linger, Peyton, she said, her gallery owners. I'm missing nothing. He's smitten. I wasn't ready, my heart still bruised, trust a fragile thing. But one night, at a quiet bistro by the Seine, its lanterns casting gold on the water, a panic attack struck mid-date. My hands shook, memories of Hugo's betrayal flooding back. Luca didn't flinch. He moved beside me, his voice steady as he guided my breathing. Focus on the river, Peyton, he murmured. It's just us here. The next day, a bouquet of lavender arrived at my museum office, a note in his neat script. No rush, just here when you're ready. Over coffee at Les Deux Magots, Luca shared his own scars. His ex-wife had left him for his business partner, taking half his Turin-based firm in a bitter divorce. Trust is a wound that heals slowly, he said, his gaze holding mine. Our friendship deepened, built on quiet moments, sketching in Jardin des Tuileries, debating art versus architecture over Chianti. Love bloomed gently, rooted in trust. A year later, in a lavender field in Provence, the air heavy with summer's perfume, Luca proposed. Under a twilight sky, he knelt among the purple blooms, offering a simple sapphire ring, understated like him, its deep blue echoing his steady heart. Peyton, you've shown me beauty in broken things, he said. My yes was a whisper, my heart whole for the first time since Hugo. I felt Isabel's presence in the breeze, her poet's soul approving. We married in a small Parisian courtyard, its cobblestones strewn with rose petals. Isabel and Marcel flew in, their faces glowing with pride. 30 loved ones, Clara, Luca's sister from Turin, my museum colleagues, joined us under a canopy of fairy lights. Sophie declined the invitation, her email cold. Prior commitment. Best wishes. Luca's vows, spoken in soft Italian and English, promised patience and trust. I'll carry your scars with mine, Peyton, and build a life where they make us stronger. Tears fell, not from pain but from a joy I thought lost forever. Isabel, in her elegant silk dress, whispered, He's your home, darling. Marcel, gruff but teary, squeezed my hand. We settled into a houseman-style apartment on the left bank, its high ceilings and parquet floors a canvas for my art and Luca's minimalist designs. I hung my favorite Chagall above our fireplace. Luca crafted a reclaimed wood table where we hosted lively dinners. My career soared. I became head curator at a prestigious left bank museum, my exhibitions drawing crowds from Berlin to Barcelona. Luca's firm thrived, his green urban projects, rooftop gardens, solar-powered libraries, earning him accolades in Architect's Journal. At a gala in Paris's Palais Garnier, a glittering affair of chandeliers and black tie, a Swedish investor mentioned Hugo's name. Albrecht's investments tanked years ago, he said, swirling his champagne. Lost a fortune betting against Moretti's green tech startup. Luca, overhearing, squeezed my hand under the table. Later, in our moonlit apartment, he admitted he'd known of Hugo, his rival in a 2018 deal where Luca's vision for sustainable tech outshone Hugo's risky bets. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to see me, not him, Luca said. Kissed him, grateful for the cosmic irony. Hugo's empire had crumbled while Luca's rose, and I, once broken, had found a love that didn't demand I dim my light. Isabel's pancreatic cancer diagnosis was a thunderbolt, pulling Luca and me back to London from our Parisian haven. I took immediate leave from my role as head curator at the Left Bank Museum, trading exhibition halls for the sterile corridors of a Harley Street clinic. Luca, ever steadfast, flew in weekly from Paris, his sustainable architecture firm humming along without him. In Isabel's final days, her Oxford bedroom, its walls lined with poetry volumes, became a sacred space. Her once vibrant frame, weakened by illness, still radiated grace. One evening, as rain pattered against the leaded windows, she grasped my hand, her fingers frail but warm. "Life's too short, Peyton," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "Find peace with Sophie. Promise me." Her eyes, still sharp with a professor's clarity, pleaded for reconciliation. I promised, though doubt gnawed at me. Could I forgive the sister who'd shattered my world? Isabel passed peacefully 3 days later, Luca and Marcel at her bedside, the room heavy with the scent of her favorite lavender. Called Sophie, our first contact in years. "Mum's gone," I said, my voice breaking. Her sharp intake of breath echoed through the line. "I'll be there," she replied, her tone raw. She arrived at the Oxford house, and we hugged, awkward, tentative, grief momentarily outweighing old grudges. The funeral, held at St. Mary's Chapel, unfolded under a grey London sky, drizzle mirroring the day's sorrow. Sophie and Hugo arrived, her Saint Laurent dress and diamond earrings screaming wealth, a stark contrast to the chapel's understated stone. Hugo's tailored suit couldn't hide his unease, his jaw tight as he scanned the crowd. When Luca returned from speaking with the funeral director, Hugo's face drained of color. "Moretti," he muttered, recognizing his old rival whose green tech startup, lauded in Milan and Copenhagen, had eclipsed Hugo's failing ventures. Sophie's smug smile, polished for Instagram, faltered when I introduced Luca. "Have you met my husband, Luca Moretti?" I said, my tone calm but pointed. Hugo's composure cracked, his eyes darting to Luca, whose quiet success in sustainable design dwarfed Hugo's crumbling empire. In a tense side-room chat, Sophie boasted of their Côte d'Azur villa, her voice dripping with forced bravado. 8 bedrooms, private beach," she said, twisting her ring, my old emerald. I smiled, unfazed. "Luca and I are happy in Paris. You should visit." Her eyes flickered with something, envy perhaps, or regret. The service was heartfelt, a tapestry of tears and memories. I delivered a eulogy, my voice steady as I spoke of Isabel's wisdom, her love for Shelley, and her knack for finding beauty in chaos. Sophie followed, her words faltering as she recalled our mother's bedtime stories. Tears overwhelmed her, and instinctively I moved to her side, placing a hand on her back. "Take your time," I whispered, surprising myself with the gesture. She finished, her tribute weaving childhood tales that drew soft laughter from the pews. The reception in our parents' Oxford home, casseroles and condolences filled the air. Hugo drank heavily. His tie loosened as he hovered near the bar, whispers of his company's failed acquisitions, debts piling up in Frankfurt, circulating among guests. Sophie's bravado softened. Her eyes, catching mine across the room, held a glimmer of regret, a crack in her curated facade. Luca left for a Paris board meeting, his embrace lingering. "You'll be okay?" he asked, packing his leather satchel. I nodded, staying to sort Isabel's belongings with Marcel. In her bedside drawer, I found a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with her elegant script. Her final entry, dated weeks before her death, read, "My greatest regret is leaving my girls estranged. I pray they find each other again." Tears fell as I traced her words. That afternoon, Sophie arrived alone, no Hugo in sight. Over coffee in the kitchen, the air thick with the scent of Isabel's chamomile tea, she confessed. Her marriage was a lie. Hugo's charm had curdled into control, their wealth a debt-fueled mirage. "He checks my phone, my emails," she said, her voice breaking. "The villa, the cars, all leveraged." She planned to divorce, to start anew in a modest London flat. We shared memories, laughing through tears about Isabel's lunchbox notes, each one a tiny poem. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a fragile bridge built on our mother's love. Back in Paris, our Haussmann apartment glowed with spring light, its walls adorned with my Chagall prints and Lucas sketches of green cities. 38, I learned I was pregnant, a miracle after years of longing, tempered by the ache that Isabel would never hold her grandchild. Yet, her poet's spirit lingered in the nursery's soft blue walls, which Luca painted with care. Sophie and I kept cautious contact, our phone calls tentative but growing warmer. She divorced Hugo, leaving his debt-ridden world for a modest job in London's fashion scene, styling for a Notting Hill boutique. Hugo's empire had crumbled, his Frankfurt ventures liquidated, his reputation in tatters, whispered about at Milan galas. My life with Luca, our art-filled home, my role as head curator at the Left Bank Museum, our coming child was richer than I dreamed. Isabel was right. Forgiveness, though incomplete, freed me from anger's weight. The scars of Sophie's betrayal remain, but they've shaped a wiser, happier me. 5 lessons linger from this journey. First, betrayal can redirect you to truer paths. Second, trust, once broken, rebuilds with patience. Third, forgiveness is for your own peace, not others deserving. Fourth, love thrives in authenticity, not flash. Fifth, scars don't define you, they guide you to resilience. If my story resonates, like, share, and subscribe for more tales of healing and hope.